Okay, so Bell work today is associated with scientific method. We're talking about theory. Theory is an educated conclusion. What's a hypothesis? Educated guess. So when you're working in medicine, first step is to do what? Yeah, identify the problem. So then what are you going to do? What's the next step? Nice job, Lily. What's the next step in the scientific method? You identified a problem, then what are you going to do? Don't miss the steps because it'll cost you money. No, you're going to do some research. So what do you do then after you've done your research? Go ahead, Hunter. You form a hypothesis. Okay, this is what I expect to happen. Then what are you going to do? Right, you're going to set up an experiment. Now, there's always more than one way to accomplish a task, so your experiment can vary after you've done it several times. Then what are you going to do? Record your data. Don't skip steps. Make sure you're recording what you are doing. This is what makes being a doctor difficult, because sometimes you're doing the same thing over and over again. You have to really be able to handle repetition. If you're doing sports, you'll understand this. The repetition of sports is pretty, like every day I get up and run 3 to 5 miles. It's just the repetition of it. Usually it's a pretty similar path. I used to, when I was younger, I would go 3 to 5 miles away from my home. But as you get older, in the morning you might have to go to the bathroom. And all it takes is once if you're like 5 miles away and you have to go number 2. Now there's a guy on YouTube that runs marathons that went in his pants and had it all over him, but I'm not going to do that. Right, so I usually stick pretty close to home. But when you stick close to home, you're seeing the same things when you're running like every day. So you just have to figure out ways to deal with the monotony of it all. That would be recording the results that you're doing. And what's the next step? Make a conclusion. So, okay, you got some results here. If you're a mechanic, you're like, look, this is my conclusion. Maybe we should change this. And then what do? You repeat it. Now, if you're, let's say, a knee surgeon or a shoulder surgeon, and you're repeating things and you're coming up with a really... Very good.
That they make in different parts of the world. They could identify the gravitational force for every time they weigh something, but that would not be practical or convenient.
And then what?
And then come up with the pieces.
No, you can identify the problem. Just because you make an observation doesn't mean you identify the problem. So you're just observing things. You might have to keep observing for a while until you make a problem identified. It's not easy to do. Most of your employers want you to be able to do this. Most people can't. Most people are oblivious. They're just like walking around thinking about like their video games or not paying attention to the problems. But if you pay attention to the problems, then they're like, oh, I like that pizza. They taste better now. The other guy was like putting, I don't know, too much detergent on the dishes and it tasted like detergent. I don't know. So just remember that there are problems. So next step is to do what? Research. You could just figure out before you did an experiment that the dummy was putting like detergent on all the dishes. Then you wouldn't have to do an experiment. You did a little research, you saved the company money. You didn't even do experiments. So, research, but you find out your research is showing nothing new. Then what do? You hypothesize that I might need to try something else. Might need to, see if the flour that we've been given has been modified too much and has, I don't know, too much Roundup in it. There was a study released yesterday. They were finding Roundup, plant killer, in cereals. don't know if you saw that. So, next step.
Do an experiment that proves or doesn't prove the people's thesis.
Right, so you design your experiment. What they did with the cereal, they just designed a test to see if there was anything in there that shouldn't be in there, and they determined that there was Roundup. So then you record your results, and what do? Yeah, make a conclusion. Now, if you do it over and over again, then you can determine how much Roundup is in all the cereal, and you can say, well, this cereal's got more Roundup in it. This is concerning. Let's figure out where this is coming from, and you can stop it. They do it with, like, lettuce. There have been several companies that are serving food locally that have had problems with people getting sick. Anybody name a company? Starts with a C. Huh? Not Chick-fil-A. They fry their food typically. Chipotle? Chipotle? Well, whatever. I think Chipotle is like a seasoning. Chipotle's a seasoning.
I think it's because like people keep it overnight. You're not supposed to reheat rice.
Yeah.
Because it causes like bacteria. When people reheat it, they get sick. They say it's Chipotle. It's really good.
Ah. See, over here we've got research happening. Now, once you have done your experiment multiple times, let's say that Javion. Let's say Javion is a medical doctor. What kind of medical doctor are you going to be, Javion? He's going to be an orthopedic surgeon. Once he has done enough surgeries, he now develops a theory. What's a theory?
An answer that could lead to many possibilities.
Right, it's an educated conclusion. Write this down. So Javion, is that right? He has to go educate his colleagues. They will invite him to do a conference, and he's going to stand up and say, this is what I have done that's different from what you're doing. So you have to educate people about your theory. Does everybody understand? That's what a theory is. Nice job. So we have those up here on the overhead. You want to check your work? What's the mole? You're close. It's a number. Look behind you. You'll see the number. 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. How did they count that number? What did they use to count the mole? And when we count things, sometimes we'll pick them up and count them, or we'll use machines to count them. Like they'll use light sometimes to count, let's say, paper clips. They use the electron to count the mole because there's so many of them. We'll talk more about how they did it later, but just remember they used the electron to get to that number. Electricity. Every month you have an electric bill, so you can determine how much electricity you use to make silver out of silver nitrate, and then from that amount of electricity you use, you just count the electrons that you used, and you have the mole. So it's a reliable number. It's not something we just made up.